Imagine this. A man strong and in control of his work, his finances, his relationships, suddenly feels something within him crack open. Not because of words, not because of actions, but simply because of the presence of a woman. She says nothing, makes no move. She is simply there. It is not her beauty. It is not her sweetness. It is something else, something that awakens a part of him he never knew had fallen asleep. Carl Jung once said, "We do not fall in love with the other person as they are. We fall in love with the qualities of our own soul that we have forgotten reflected back to us through them." And perhaps that is the real reason men sometimes fall into a love that defies reason, a love that arises from the deepest, most unconscious layers of the psyche. No one teaches a man how to love with his soul. He is taught how to achieve, how to conquer, how to control, but never how to be touched. And so when it happens, his first instinct is not to open, but to retreat. Why does a profound experience make a man pull away? Why does a woman simply being herself stir something so unsettling in him? In this video, we will descend into a realm few dare to explore, the awakening of the anima, the unconscious feminine within the male soul, stirred not by effort, but by the quiet, unassuming presence of a woman. We will explore why the male soul does not love with logic but with symbol, why women who do not chase or demand often leave the deepest imprint, and what truly begins when a relationship seems to end. If you have ever been that man or the woman whose presence caused someone to walk away in silence, not because of indifference but because they were stirred too deeply, then this video is for you. Next, we will look directly at the core question, what is it that a man's soul truly seeks in a woman? And the answer lies not on the surface, but deep in the unconscious. There are connections that are neither loud nor clear, that carry no names, yet they leave a lasting imprint within us. A single glance, a presence, a sensation as if something deep inside has been stirred, even though the other person didn't try to do anything. This is not love as we've known it. It is the soul brushing against a living symbol, what Jung called an activation of the collective unconscious. The man in this story is not weak. He is not easily shaken. He has everything in his grasp: career, recognition, a razor-sharp mind. And then she appears, not with promises, not with a calculated smile, but with the quiet steadiness of someone rooted in herself. She does not need to be seen, and yet she is. She does not try to claim anything, and yet she opens a doorway he never knew he was standing before. What happens in that moment is not that he falls in love with her, but that he is brought face to face with himself. We often think love begins with romance, chemistry, attraction, but Jung pointed to something deeper. True love begins when an inner image is awakened, when a part of us that has never lived is called to life by the presence of another. That is when the unconscious begins to speak. Think about it. Why do some people met only once stay with you forever? Why does someone who did nothing special still leave you feeling hollow when they walk away? Because they weren't just a person, they were a symbol. They stirred something within you, a forgotten soul part, a buried emotion, a desire that never had a name. And when that happens, the man is thrown into confusion. He retreats, avoids, pulls back. Not because he feels nothing, but because he feels too much and doesn't understand why. Jung called this moment the encounter with the shadow, when the ego loses its grip over what is rising from the depths. It's not weakness, it is the beginning of true maturation. There's something interesting here. Many women have experienced this too, but from a different angle. They find themselves drawn to someone unworthy, obsessed with a glance, pulled into something inexplicable. That too is not love, but the activation of unhealed parts within perhaps a father image, a first love, or unconscious expectations carried for years. What separates a real soul stirring from an emotional illusion is the level of awareness that follows the experience. For the man, this is a moment when his ego is shaken. But if he chooses to stay with the feeling, not run, not replace, not blame her, then something extraordinary happens. A door opens, a door that leads back to the soul. And if you've ever experienced something like this, you are not alone. Share your feelings or your story in the comments. Someone out there might be reading and see themselves in your words. Because this soul, this path does not belong to just one person. In the next part, we'll go deeper into the mechanism of projection, the process that makes us believe we're in love with another, when in truth we are in love with an unlived part of ourselves reflected through them. It is the greatest blind spot in modern relationships, But if seen clearly, it becomes the greatest key to inner freedom. Stay with this journey, because maybe what you've been searching for all along was never just someone to love, but an image that would lead you back to the forgotten parts of your soul. Nothing frightens a man more than being truly seen. Not through admiration, not through praise for his strength or success, but seen in the place no one has ever entered, the place where his wounds live, where his fears hide, where his vulnerability breathes, though he himself denies it. And when a woman does not try to reach that place, does not analyze, demand, or attempt to heal him, but simply is present in her own truth, something strange happens. She doesn't touch his body. She touches the architecture of his soul's defenses. And when that happens, his first instinct is not to draw closer, but to pull away. Have you ever seen a man grow distant after a deep soul-level conversation? Have you felt the tremble in him real and raw, only for him to retreat to schedules, logic, and cold detachment, as if nothing ever occurred? That is not pretending. That is the defense mechanism of a soul unprepared. When a man's soul is stirred, it does not rejoice, it trembles, because it calls forth everything buried. The childhood fear of abandonment, the ache of never being enough to be loved unconditionally, the longing to be soft in a world that never gave him permission. This is when the shadow rises. And if he has never done the inner work, these emotions crash like a tidal wave against a nervous system that never learned to swim. Picture this, a 40-year-old man, successful, respected. Hasn't cried since he was 15. One day he meets a woman who isn't trying to impress, who simply listens, does not judge, and sees him with eyes that expect nothing. And in that silence he shatters. Not because of anything she did, but because her energy invited him to face a part of himself he's never dared to meet. Meanwhile, women, when touched in the soul, tend to move closer. They do not run. They feel, inquire, write, cry, share. They reach out. But men are not taught how to hold such depth. So they go to the gym, bury themselves in work, or rush into another relationship, not because they've moved on, but because they cannot bear the truth that has awakened. And so this message is for both. For the woman left confused by a man's sudden withdrawal, you were never not enough. You were too real. You weren't abandoned. You awakened something he wasn't ready to see. And for the man now haunted by a woman who passed through your life, leaving behind a pain that is both beautiful and unbearable, this is your invitation. Don't turn away, look inward. Because what shook you was not an ending, it was a beginning. You don't need to understand it all today. But know this, the more impossible something is to put into words, the more likely it arises from the unconscious. And if you can stay with the trembling, without escaping, without rationalizing, without replacing, you will enter what Jung called individuation, the journey of becoming who you truly are. And you are not alone. Thousands, men and women alike, are walking through these unnamed, unforgettable soul encounters. I invite you to share below a moment you awakened someone or were awakened yourself. Your story may be a lantern for someone still wandering. If you see yourself in these words, leave a sign. Let's remind each other we are not strange. We are souls awakening. And in the next part, we will go even deeper. What truly happens when the symbolic woman walks away? How can a man discern between real love and projection? And how can the pain of awakening become the path to true healing? You've come a long way. Now is the time to cross the inner threshold where darkness is no longer a threat, but an invitation to become yourself. Within the deep layers of a man's unconscious lives, a presence both elusive and powerful known in Jungian psychology as the Anima. She is not a specific woman. She is not even the ideal type in his conscious mind. She is the symbolic embodiment of the feminine soul within him, formed through personal experience, cultural imprint, and the collective memory of humankind. The Anima is the gateway to a man's own soul. Without her, he may achieve success, demonstrate strength, but he will always feel a silent emptiness he cannot explain. Carl Jung described 4 stages in the development of the Anima, each one marking an evolution in how a man encounters and integrates his inner feminine. Eve, the instinctual level, the nurturing mother. At this stage, a man seeks care and comfort, is drawn to maternal protection, but often falls into dependency. Helen, the aesthetic level, the seductive, inspiring woman. Love here is intoxicating, idealized, but vulnerable to illusion and fantasy. Mary, the spiritual level, the pure, inwardly radiant woman. She awakens contemplation, inner longing, and the call to transcend the ego. Sophia, the wisdom level, the complete feminine, not as a romantic object, but as a sacred teacher, a symbol of inner wholeness, guiding him toward self-realization. But here lies the challenge: not everyone can distinguish the true Anima from a distorted reflection. The negative Anima often appears when a man has not yet engaged with his unconscious. She becomes a haunting siren of seductive obsession, a whispering voice of inadequacy, an invisible manipulator drawing him into self-destructive relationships. The positive Anima, by contrast, is a guide she does not overwhelm or control, but gently invites him back to himself. To encounter a woman who awakens this true Anima is a blessing, but only if he is ready to stop idealizing. Because if he isn't careful, the Anima can easily be mistaken for true love. You begin to idealize that person. You project onto them all the qualities you feel are missing in yourself. You don't see them as they are. You see them as a figure in your inner dream. And then when they no longer match that image, you feel betrayed. Not because they changed, but because the dream you cast upon them has faded. This is the difference between the illusory Anima and the integrated Anima. The illusory Anima traps you in blind romance, in the desperate desire to merge with the other as if they will complete you. The integrated Anima leads you inward, where the other becomes a mirror, not to possess, but to reflect and awaken. Have you ever felt this, meeting someone who seemed familiar beyond time, as if they carried something sacred in their presence? Have you ever felt the ache of realizing they were not the image you believed them to be? Leave your reflections in the comments. Your story, though deeply personal, may help awaken another who is still trying to understand their own depths. You are not alone in this journey. Connect with others walking the same path. We are not merely speaking of love, we are speaking of inner rebirth. And if you are asking, how do I know if I'm loving the real person or my idealized Anima? Then stay tuned. In the next chapter, we will explore how to discern whether a relationship arises from awakening or from unhealed wounds, how a man can transform the Anima from obsession into an inner guide, and most importantly, how a woman can remain whole and rooted in her own soul, even when loving a man in the midst of his awakening. We are approaching the most essential part of this journey. Take a deep breath, stay open, and join me in the next chapter where the Anima is no longer a haunting ghost, but becomes the sacred light that leads you home. There is a seductive and deeply rooted mistake that countless men fall into: the belief that she came to save them, as if the arrival of this woman, gentle, radiant, grounded, were some fated gift meant to heal every fracture in his soul. But she is not a savior. She is a signal, a threshold, a bell that awakens. And if he misreads that, he will try to possess her, hold her, control her, instead of awakening himself. Carl Jung called this the beginning of individuation, the soul's journey when it stops seeking salvation outside and begins turning inward to become whole. Individuation is not a glamorous path. It does not shine like a cinematic romance. It is a quiet process where you sit with wounds no one sees, gaze into the raw mirror of the soul, and dare to ask, who am I when I no longer need to be loved to feel worthy? What remains of me when she is no longer there to reflect my beauty? Do I have the courage to face the parts of me she accidentally exposed? Because the truth is, she didn't hurt you. She revealed the hurt you've carried all along. And if you're awake enough, not to blame her, not to replace her, not to retreat into half-living, then something sacred begins. You stop loving her as a woman and start loving the part of your soul she awakened. Imagine a man emerging from a broken relationship. No more late-night conversations, no more feeling seen, and yet he doesn't go searching for the next girl. Instead, he begins to write. He begins to meditate. He dives into his past, reconciles with his inner mother, and listens to the quiet voice within that's been waiting buried for years. He is no longer the same man. He no longer lives to be validated. He lives to connect with his true self. That is individuation. And the woman, though now gone, remains within him, not as longing, but as an internalized archetype. She becomes part of the journey, not the destination, a beginning, not the rescue. This is why, after a soul-deep connection, you never truly forget them. Not because the love remains, but because the energy they awakened is now yours to carry forward alone. Have you ever felt this? Someone left but never truly disappeared? because they stirred something in you that you can no longer turn away from. If so, I invite you to share. Your honest story may become a lantern for someone else walking through their own night. We are not bonded merely because we once loved, but because we were once awakened. Let this video be a space where awakened souls find one another. And if you are the woman watching this who once passed through a man's life, leaving behind an unnamed tremble, know this: you were not meaningless. You were the spark. But remember, you did not come to save anyone. You came to be yourself, and if that awakens someone, that is their work to do. In the next and most vital chapter, we'll explore: how can a man integrate both his anima and his shadow without losing himself? How can old pain become spiritual fuel rather than emotional burden? And if a reunion ever occurs after all the healing, can they look at each other not from possession, but from a new conscious wholeness? You are walking a path no one can walk for you, but you are not walking it alone. See you in the final chapter, where true beauty begins, not from romantic love, but from the moment you come home to yourself. When a man has weathered the storm of emotion, allowed the anima to awaken, dared to face his shadow, and taken the first steps on the path of individuation, the greatest question is no longer who do I love, but rather how do I continue? This is the moment when a new self is just beginning to emerge. And like a fragile seedling, it requires space care, and above all, a clear inner path. Because without it, the awakening will fade like a beautiful dream forgotten by morning. So what now? How do we not just feel from the depths, but live from them? Begin with inner work. No longer seeking answers from others, from ex-lovers or empty advice. Instead, turning inward and asking, what emotions keep repeating themselves within me? What do I avoid most in my daily life? Who or what triggers me deeply? And why? Even 10 minutes of journaling each day will begin to reveal your patterns. And only when we see the pattern do we gain the power to reshape it. Therapy not because you are broken, but because you are ready to go deeper. A good therapist does not fix you. They hold the mirror so you can see yourself more clearly. If possible, find a therapist trained in Jungian or depth psychology, because this path is not about managing emotions. It's about reading the map of the soul. Dream work, the forgotten treasure. Jung said dreams are the windows of the unconscious. Do not dismiss the strange symbols that visit you at night. Write them down. Look for recurring images. Share them with others doing the same work. You'll be amazed your soul is speaking every night. Create an inner sanctuary. A small corner, candles, books, incense, music. Anything that helps you reconnect to yourself. Once a week, no phone, no social media, just you and deep questions. What am I hiding? What am I longing for but afraid to admit? If my soul had a voice today, what would it say? Don't do this alone. Let this video be a space to share your journey, even if just a thought, a feeling, a dream. Your comment is not just a response. It is a heartbeat in a growing community of awakening souls. And if you've read this far, perhaps it's time to realize you are no longer just a viewer. You are stepping into the lead role of your own journey. In the next and deeper chapter, we'll explore how to tell the difference between true awakening and spiritual illusion. What happens when the anima is integrated and the shadow becomes an ally? And is it possible to meet again the one who awakened you, but from an entirely new version of yourself? Keep this vibration alive within you, because often it is not the grand events, but the quiet, steady rhythm of inner work that changes everything. You are no longer who you once were, and from here there is no going back. But that is the clearest sign of all you are on the right path. See you in the final chapter, where the journey is no longer about finding love, but about returning to your original soul. When the journey into the inner world comes to an end, it does not close like a book with its cover shut. It opens like a door just slightly ajar. You are no longer the same person who began this video. Something has shifted, a quiet empathy, a fragile spark of recognition, or perhaps an old wound that has finally been given a name. Carl Jung once said, "We do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." If at any moment in this video you found yourself pausing, falling silent, or remembering someone from your past, that was your own light beginning to touch the depths of your unconscious. You see, the person who moves us most is not the one who is flawless, but the one who awakens a part of our soul that has long been asleep. They do not come to stay but to awaken, not to heal us, but to invite us into the sacred work of self-healing. And if you have ever been the one who left quietly, know that your absence may have been the holy spark that ignited someone else's silent transformation. And if you are the one walking through the confusion after a deep connection, perhaps this is not the end, but the beginning of meeting yourself again. Let the comment section below become a place where you share your milestones on this journey. A strange dream, an unnameable feeling, a small awakening. You might be surprised how a few honest words from you can illuminate someone else's soul. If this content felt like warm water flowing into a place in you that has been spiritually dry, leave your mark by subscribing and turning on the notification bell so we can continue to walk together through reflections like this. This is not just a YouTube channel, it's a small sanctuary for souls finding their way home to themselves. Before we part, I leave you with 3 questions. You do not need to answer them now, just carry them with you like seeds. Which part of me is still waiting to be truly seen? Whose awakening have I been the symbol for, even if only once? What is asking me to be more honest with myself starting today? I'll see you on the next journey, where there are no right answers, only sincerity to lead the way. And if one day you look back and find you have traveled farther than you ever imagined, that is the sign you are living true to the depths of your soul.